They say life sharpens you, but what about when it breaks you? It's late again, isn't it? The kind of late where the world has gone quiet, but your thoughts won't. Where the clock blinks in the dark, and your chest feels heavier than it did at dinner. Not from food, but from memory. You lie there still, with your eyes open and your soul tired. And somewhere between the hum of silence and the ache in your spine, a question drifts in. What if I'm not getting stronger? What if I'm just wearing down? They say life sharpens you, that every scar is a lesson, every loss a teacher, every failure a step forward. But what about the breaks? The fractures that don't heal right, the dreams that didn't bend but snapped? What about the parts of us that didn't become wiser, just quieter? This story is for the ones who are still here, not because it's easy, but because they haven't found a way to leave. It's for you, the one who's lived a little longer than you thought you would, and carries more than anyone sees. So tonight, you don't need to perform. You don't need to fix or explain or shine. Just breathe. Just be. Let's begin. No one warns you about the quiet exhaustion that creeps in after years of trying so hard. You don't notice it at first. Not when you're busy being useful, achieving things, proving your worth to rooms that never really saw you. But one day, you wake up and realize you're tired in a way that sleep can't fix. Not just physically, but soul tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of explaining. Tired of being sharp all the time. Of being on, being ready, being good. And suddenly, everything feels dull. The things that once excited you now feel like items on a list. The people you used to chase, you now keep at a gentle distance. You find yourself sitting in silence more. Not because you're at peace, but because the noise of keeping up has become too loud to bear. There's a grief in this space, a quiet mourning of the person you were before life pressed so hard against you, before disappointment set in like a slow fog. You were once so sharp, full of angles and edges and energy. You carved your place in the world with effort and ambition. But now, you feel like a pencil worn down to the wood. Still functional, but softened, frayed, fragile. And in this state, you start to wonder, is there still value in me? Even if I'm no longer sharp? Even if I'm not producing or proving or pushing? The world doesn't reward softness. It praises the grind, the hustle, the sparkle of newness. But what if there's wisdom in the worn? What if being dulled by life isn't a flaw, but a testament? What if the gentler version of you isn't a step backward, but a sign of evolution? You begin to see it differently. The wear and tear isn't failure, it's memory, it's resilience, it's proof that you've lived, that you've kept going, even when the world asked too much of you. And maybe, just maybe, you're not broken, you're becoming. There's no applause in the middle, just breath, and showing up, and maybe that's more heroic than we think. Some weights don't show up on a scale. Some are invisible, measured in withheld truths, in unspoken needs, in the silence you keep because you don't want to be a burden. You learn early that speaking up has consequences, that vulnerability invites misunderstanding. So you swallow your pain, you shrink your needs, you wear a smile that doesn't reach your eyes, and you become fluent in the language of pretending. But the truth is, every time you silence yourself, you chip away at your sense of worth, not because your silence isn't valid, but because somewhere along the way, you started to believe your voice didn't matter. And over time, that silence becomes heavy, not in your throat, but in your chest, not in your words, but in your being. You start to feel like a ghost in your own life, present but unseen. You become the person everyone counts on, but no one really knows. You make space for others, but leave none for yourself. And eventually, the cost of that silence becomes unbearable. So maybe it's time to speak. Not to shout, not to argue, but to name what's true for you. Even if your voice trembles, even if the words don't come out perfectly, even if not everyone understands, you deserve to be heard. You deserve to be known. You deserve to exist out loud. And slowly, as you begin to say the words you were once afraid of, you'll feel lighter. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You'll realize that your truth doesn't make you a burden. It makes you real. It makes you whole. Some of the heaviest burdens are the words we never say. Let this be the day you start setting them down. There's a part of life that doesn't get mentioned in graduation speeches or highlight reels. It's not the beginning, full of hope and ambition. And it's not the triumphant ending, the kind that makes for good stories. It's the middle, the part where things are unclear, where progress is invisible, where you're not who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. No one claps in the middle. No one posts about it. It's quiet, messy, uncomfortable. You wake up and feel like nothing is changing. You do the work, but don't see the reward. You show up, and it feels like no one notices. And yet, this is where everything is happening. Beneath the surface, in the roots, in the stretch between what was and what will be. You're being shaped, softened, tested, refined. The middle is where you learn endurance, where you practice faith, where you stop relying on outcomes and start choosing alignment. It's where you let go of timelines, where you question everything and learn to trust your own voice. It's the valley before the view, the silence before the song. It's where most people quit because they think nothing's happening, but it is. You're growing in ways you can't see, healing in ways you don't yet feel, preparing for things you can't yet name. So if you're in the middle, stay. Keep showing up, keep breathing, keep trusting, because one day you'll look back and realize the middle was never empty. It was sacred. The middle doesn't sparkle, but it transforms, and that's worth everything. There comes a time when you're no longer fighting to prove yourself, no longer sharpening your edges to match the world's expectations. You stop trying to win. Stop trying to be louder, faster, better. And in that surrender, you find something softer, a quiet strength, a tender resilience. You realize that being soft isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the strength to feel fully, to stay open, to risk being hurt again and again, and still choose to love. You begin to trust your gentleness, to see it not as a liability, but as a gift. The way you notice small things, the way you hold space for others, the way you speak with intention, listen with your whole body, and offer grace instead of judgment. That's power. A different kind. One that doesn't demand attention, but changes the room quietly. You start softening your schedule, not because you're lazy, but because you've remembered your worth isn't in your busyness. You say no, not with guilt, but with clarity. You stop defending your choices to people who never had to live with them. You stop begging life to look like someone else's. And in that softening, you find yourself again. The real you. The one who loves freely, who cries easily, who laughs loud, who believes deeply. And maybe, just maybe, this version of you was never lost, just buried beneath all the noise. Now you're peeling it back, layer by layer, returning, not to who you were before the world hardened you, but to someone braver, someone softer, someone beautifully whole. being soft again after life tried to harden you. That's a kind of victory no one claps for, but it's the one that matters most. Some people think strength is loud, bold, unapologetic. But not all strength announces itself. Some of it whispers. Some of it stays behind. Some of it chooses not to leave when it easily could. There's a quiet kind of power in staying, not because you have no other choice, but because your heart tells you it still matters. To stay in a relationship that's healing. To stay in a job that drains you but feeds your family. To stay in a body that feels foreign and still offer it kindness. Staying doesn't mean settling. It means honoring the parts of you that still see hope, still hold love, still believe something good is possible, even if it's not visible yet. Staying means waking up on days you'd rather disappear. It means choosing to show up for people who wouldn't blame you if you didn't. And sometimes, staying means holding on to yourself. When the world keeps trying to pull you away from you, you're not weak for staying. You are not foolish. You are not naive. You are rooted. You are resilient. You are brave in a way that doesn't get praised, but should. So if today you stayed, in your body, in your truth, in your life, thank you. That's strength too, the quiet kind. The kind that changes things. Staying doesn't always feel like strength, but it is. It always is. You've seen them. The ones who don't stand in the spotlight, but always make sure it's on for others. The ones who notice when you're not okay, but never make a scene. Who remember the tiny things, your favorite snack, your hard day, your father's anniversary. They're the ones who leave the porch light on. Not just literally, but emotionally. They're the safe place you come back to. The steady hand you didn't have to ask for. They don't ask for recognition. They're not performing kindness. It's just who they are. They carry more than they let on. They show up even when they're exhausted. They hold space for others without needing to fill it with noise or solutions. And sometimes, they wonder if anyone sees them, if their quiet love matters, if their steady presence makes a difference. So let me say this. Yes, it does. You matter. Your light matters. Even if no one's clapping, even if no one's thanking you, even if the world keeps moving too fast to notice, you are anchoring more than you know. You are the reason someone made it through today. You are the reminder that softness still exists. You are the keeper of warmth in a cold, fast world. And maybe no one has told you this lately. Thank you. Thank you for staying kind in a world that sometimes forgets how. Thank you for keeping the light on, not just for others, but for yourself too. Because even the ones who give light deserve to bask in it, to rest in it, to be seen in it. You don't have to shine to be light. Sometimes just being steady is the most luminous thing of all. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being strong for too long. You know the kind. The kind that shows up after a long day, when the house is quiet and you've handled everything again. When no one checks in because they assume you've got it handled. Because you always do. You're the one who holds things together, the one who knows what to say, the one who comforts others, even while your own chest feels hollow. And it's not that people don't care, it's that they don't see. They've grown used to your strength. It's become invisible. You've become the safe place for others, the steady one, the dependable one. But who holds you? Who asks how you are without expecting you to brush it off? Who offers support without needing to be reassured in return? It's a quiet ache, not sharp, not dramatic, just there. A hum beneath your daily rhythms. Sometimes it makes you want to disappear. Not forever, just long enough to see if anyone notices the sea, but you don't. Because you've made promises, because you know what it's like to be left, because you care. And that's the paradox of the strong ones. They're often the most tender-hearted, the most loyal, the most exhausted. Not because they lack boundaries, but because they love deeply. Because they know the pain of being unsupported, and they never want to be the reason someone else feels that way. But here's what you need to know. You deserve support too. You deserve softness. You deserve to be asked, to be held, to be loved, not just for what you give, but for who you are. You don't have to be everyone's rock. Sometimes you get to be water, fluid, uncertain, and still worthy. You are not failing because you're tired. You are not weak because you long to be cared for. You are human, and the strong ones. They need love too. So if no one has told you lately, you don't have to carry it all. You can put it down, even if just for a while. Let someone in. Let yourself rest. Let yourself be held. Because even the strongest hearts need soft places to land. It's okay to be the strong one. It's even more okay to not be, just for a moment. There's a moment that no one prepares you for. The moment you do something brave, something hard, something quietly noble, and there's no one there to witness it. No applause, no recognition, just you, and your choice to keep going anyway. It's a strange kind of strength to hold yourself upright when no one is watching, to get out of bed when the weight of everything says you shouldn't, to keep showing up for your kids, for your partner, for your job, for yourself, without any trophies or fanfare. And maybe the hardest part isn't the effort itself, it's the silence that follows it, the empty inbox after you pour your heart into something, the birthdays you remember that no one else does, the way you hold space for everyone, and sometimes wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared. But still, you keep going. Still, you keep choosing kindness. Still, you keep believing in love, in goodness, in the quiet power of persistence. Because deep down, you know that not everything sacred is seen. Not everything worthwhile is celebrated. Sometimes the most heroic moments are the ones that happen behind closed doors. When you make a better choice, when you stay patient, when you don't give up on yourself. That matters. That counts. Even if no one claps. Even if no one ever knows. Because at the end of the day, you do. You know what it took. You know how far you've come. And maybe, just maybe, that quiet knowing is more powerful than 1,000 cheers. So if you're in that place right now, where you're carrying more than anyone sees, where you're doing your best and hearing only silence, please know this: you are seen, you are valid, you are not invisible, you are a quiet force, a steady presence, a light that doesn't flicker, even without applause. And one day, you'll look back and realize that was the moment you became someone unshakable. Not because you were celebrated, but because you kept going. You don't need a standing ovation to be valid. You just need to stand, softly, quietly, and completely, in your truth. Letting go sounds so poetic, doesn't it? Like release, like surrender, like the breeze catching you just in time. But it doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes it feels like failure, like giving up, like grief. You tell yourself you're supposed to hold on, that if you just tried harder, prayed more, believed longer, maybe it wouldn't be ending. But not everything that ends is a mistake. Not everything lost was meant to be kept. Letting go isn't weakness. It's clarity. It's honoring the truth that something no longer fits, and loving yourself enough to stop forcing it. It might be a person, a dream, an identity, a story you told yourself for years. And in the letting go, there's pain. Of course there is. Because we don't just lose the thing, we lose what we hoped it would become. But after the grief, a strange thing happens. You start to breathe again. You notice sunlight. You hear your own voice, as if for the first time. And it's not because letting go fixes everything. It doesn't. It just makes space for something different, for something true. You learn that peace isn't always the result of holding on tighter. Sometimes it's the quiet that rushes in after you finally loosen your grip. You begin to trust that what's meant for you won't require you to betray yourself to keep it. And slowly, you realize you didn't lose yourself in the letting go. You found yourself. You reclaimed your energy. You remembered your worth. You made room for the life that's waiting. Letting go isn't the end. It's the beginning of your return to who you were always meant to be. There are places in the world that feel like a breath you didn't know you were holding. Not grand or loud or shiny, but soft, still. They remind you of something ancient inside you, something before the striving, before the proving, before the noise. These spaces don't need you to perform. They don't need you to be healed or whole or figured out. They just hold you, exactly as you are. Sometimes it's a quiet morning light pouring into a room where no one is asking anything of you. Sometimes it's a friend who listens without needing to fix. Sometimes it's a page, a walk, a patch of sky. You don't have to earn these spaces. They wait for you. They always have. Because the real you, beneath the armor, the edits, the endless effort, has always been worthy of rest. And when you allow yourself to enter these spaces, something inside you unclenches. You stop bracing. Stop performing. Stop trying to be impressive. And you just are. Breathing. Alive. Enough. The world will pull at you. Demand versions of you that smile bigger, shine brighter, speak louder. But you are not a performance. You are a person, a soul, a story. And the places that matter, the ones that restore you, will never ask you to be anything but real. So if life has worn you thin, if the world feels too loud, come back to the spaces that wait. They're still here, still open, still holding you. Because the healing doesn't always happen in motion. Sometimes it happens in stillness. Sometimes the safest place isn't ahead, but within. The world moves fast, but the spaces that matter, they wait for the real you, always. There's something sacred about starting over. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with a fresh soundtrack or a cinematic sunrise. It often starts in the dark, in the stillness, after a breaking. It's that first deep breath after crying until there's nothing left. That small flicker of curiosity. What if there's something more? What if this isn't the end? We don't talk enough about how brave it is to begin again. To look at the pieces, and instead of throwing away, you choose to build something new. Not because it's easy, but because there's something inside you that refuses to give up. You start small, with a clean sink, a walk around the block, a phone call, a journal entry. You start again by forgiving yourself for the time you lost, the chances you missed, the person you couldn't be. You give yourself grace to be a beginner, to not know, to be awkward, to stumble. But you learn that starting again isn't about reclaiming the past. It's about honoring who you are now and trusting that's enough to begin. It's letting go of the need for perfection and reaching for what's real. And yes, it will be hard. You might doubt yourself. You might want to quit again. But you've done hard things before. You've survived what tried to break you. And this time, you're not building from scratch. You're building from experience, from wisdom, from truth. And that matters. So take the first step. Even if it's shaky, even if it's small, even if your voice trembles when you say, "I'm trying again," that's enough. That's everything. You don't have to be ready to start again. You just have to be willing. We live in a world that worships momentum. More, faster, now. But what if healing doesn't look like hustle? What if becoming doesn't require movement? What if the most profound changes happen when you stop? There is a peace found only in the pause, the breath between chapters, the silence between answers. It's where the noise settles, where clarity drips in, not in a flood, but a whisper. You've been running so long, you forgot what stillness feels like. And when you finally stop, it can feel like loss, like something must be wrong. But maybe it's just life making space. Maybe your nervous system is catching up. Maybe your soul has something to say, and it can't be heard in motion. In the pause, you start to notice how tired you really are, how much beauty you've missed while speeding past, how deeply you crave your own presence. The pause is where integration happens, where wisdom lands, where healing is stitched in. You don't have to chase your worth. You don't have to earn rest. Right here, in this pause, you are already enough, already whole, already becoming. So let the world spin. Let others race. Let the timeline go. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are breathing. And that is holy. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is pause and listen to the part of you that's been whispering all along. There's a moment, quiet and subtle, when something shifts inside you. It doesn't come with fireworks. There's no applause, just a gentle realization. You don't have to keep earning your place here. You don't have to prove your worth through productivity, through perfection, through pretending to be okay when you're not. You are allowed to exist, to take up space, to rest, not because you've done enough, but because you are enough. When you start believing you're worthy, everything changes, not all at once, but slowly. You speak more gently to yourself. You stop explaining your choices to people who never understood your heart. You say no without guilt. You say yes without fear. You begin to trust your own rhythm. You stop waiting for permission. You stop apologizing for your presence, your softness, your truth. It's not arrogance, it's remembrance. You remember that your worth was never in question. It was just buried beneath layers of shame. Comparison, conditioning. You begin to see yourself with kinder eyes, noticing the strength it took to survive, the tenderness you still offer in a harsh world, the beauty of being real in a culture of masks. And when someone offers you love, kindness, opportunity, you receive it, not with suspicion, but with open hands, because now you believe you deserve good things. Not because you've suffered enough, not because you've earned it, but because you're human, and that is enough. There's a peace in this worthiness, a rootedness, a quiet knowing you are not a project to fix. You are not a problem to solve. You are a story unfolding, a life becoming. And in that knowing, you begin to live differently, freer, truer, softer. You stop striving for love and start becoming it. You don't become worthy. You remember you already were. It doesn't always happen in a moment. Sometimes you wake up and feel the same. You make your coffee. You fold the laundry. You go about your day like nothing's shifted. But then, you find yourself responding differently. Less urgency, more breath. You hear an old song, and instead of aching, you smile. You walk past a mirror, and for once, you don't pick yourself apart. You face a conflict, and you don't shrink or explode. You pause. You breathe. You choose differently, and it dawns on you. You've changed. Not in the loud, dramatic ways, not in the way the world often measures transformation, but in the subtle, steady, heart-level shifts. You've softened without breaking. You've learned to stay with discomfort instead of numbing it. You've stopped chasing people who can't meet you. You started meeting yourself. The old patterns still knock, but you don't always answer. You've become more rooted, more honest, more compassionate with yourself. You've grieved. You've released. You've rebuilt. And now you're here. Not fixed, not finished, but freer. You no longer apologize for taking up space. You no longer bend just to be accepted. You've reclaimed pieces of yourself that you once gave away for approval. And maybe no one else sees it. Maybe the world keeps spinning, unaware of your quiet evolution. But you see it, you feel it, and that matters. You are not who you used to be. You've outgrown the old you without having to hate her. You can honor the one who survived, while still embracing the one who's arriving. Because this is what growth looks like. Not always loud, but always real. Growth isn't always about becoming someone new. Sometimes it's about remembering who you were before the world told you otherwise. Joy doesn't always return with trumpets. Sometimes it tiptoes in, soft, unassuming, a whisper after a long silence. You may not even recognize it at first. It feels so different from the intensity you once chased. So quiet, so fragile. But then you notice the way sunlight dances on your floor, the sound of your own laughter, a little rusty but real, the ease in your breath when you realize you're not waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is joy. Not the ecstatic kind, but the grounded kind. The one that coexists with your scars, not in spite of them. It doesn't erase your pain. It doesn't demand your story be neat. It simply holds your hand and says, "You made it, and now we live." You stop asking joy to prove itself. You stop questioning whether you deserve it. You just let it sit beside you, quietly, like an old friend who never needed explanations. And you realize this is what you were always longing for. Not the big high, but the peace of ordinary wonder, the freedom to feel good without guilt, the right to enjoy without needing to earn it. This is joy, reimagined. Not an escape from real life, but a return to it. And maybe you don't need to chase joy anymore. Maybe you just need to notice it, resting softly in the corners of your becoming. Joy doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it waits until you're quiet enough to hear it. Somewhere along the journey, you realize you've become the person you once needed. Not perfect, not all-knowing, but present. You've learned to listen the way you wished someone had listened to you, to hold space the way you longed to be held, to speak gently even when the world is loud. You've stopped chasing approval and started offering yourself permission. You've turned your wounds into wisdom, not because pain is noble, but because you refuse to let it make you bitter. Now you walk with more intention. You say less, but mean more. You give without losing yourself. You rest without guilt. You've begun to live as though your existence is sacred, because it is. There's no certificate for this, no ceremony, no grand reward. Just quiet knowing, just grounded breath, just the soft strength of someone who's been broken open and chose to rebuild with care. And maybe that's the point all along. Not to impress, not to perform, but to return. To the person you were always becoming. To the love you were always capable of. To the peace you thought you had to earn. You no longer wait for the world to give you what you lacked. You become it. And in doing so, you offer that same healing to others, not by fixing them, but by being whole in front of them. That's the legacy. That's the quiet revolution. That's what remains after the storm. You. Still here, still soft, still becoming. And that is more than enough. That is everything. You survived, you softened, you stayed, and somewhere in the quiet, you became the person you always needed.